The podcast that you're listening to is being presented to you with the cooperation of the SJ Network. If you're a person who needs a publicist and you want to appear on podcasts, contact Stephen Joyner at s-j-network.com. Let's get on with the show.
Hey, Henry, did you know that today's guest, Michael Stein, starred in a short film that led to the creation of the movie Boogie Nights?
Yes. And now he hosts a podcast about people making comebacks. Michael has certainly done a lot. I wish I could make a comeback.
Well, since the Sherpa writes these intros, don't count on it being a funny comeback.
Attention, rebels of the Sherpalution. Today's podcast is being sponsored by Audible, the home of audiobooks and podcasts, where there are over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. If you'd like a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial, go to www.audibletrial.com/Sherpa. And now Mr. Bruce will lead you into the Sherpa Chalet. As a reminder, please don't disturb the yak.
Welcome to Too Many Podcasts, the podcast about podcasts. Now, podcasting from the Sherpa Chalet on Mount Podcastia, here's your host, Jim, the podcast Sherpa.
Hello there, rebels, and welcome to Too Many Podcasts, the podcast about podcasts and so much more. And you know who this is, me, Jim, the podcast Sherpa. Who else would it be? I don't know. I keep asking that question. I never get another answer. So it's me. You know, on my show, I've interviewed performers and I've interviewed podcasters and a lot of people in between as well. And it's very rare that I get to interview someone who is an actor, creator, and also a podcaster, all in one. But that's the story with my guest today. So I bet I know what your question is going to be.
Who's our guest today, Sherpa?
Oh, I thought it was, can I give you $100? But yes, you can give me $100. But yes, our guest today, his name is Michael Stein. He is the host of the podcast Long Shot Leaders. And he gets to interview people who have made amazing comebacks. And Michael knows a little bit about making a comeback himself. And you're going to get to know him in this interview. And you'll hear what I'm talking about. Interesting stories, really fascinating background. I think he's really a natural for this type of podcast, which I don't really get to say too often. And I know we've had a few guests on shows where we've had the theme of resilience, but I know everybody likes these kinds of podcasts. So, hey, the more the merrier. And this one will make you merry. And I think you are going to enjoy what Michael has to say. So here is my interview with Michael Stein of the Long Shot Leaders podcast. Hello there, rebels. We are here at the Comeback Room in the Sherpa Chalet. My guest today is an actor, a comedian, an entrepreneur, and also, most importantly, right now, the host of a podcast called Long Shot Leaders. And we're going to be spending a little time so you guys can get to know him. His name is Michael Stein. Michael, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Jim. Thank you so much.
The Long Shot Leaders. Now, from what I was reading about you, and I was kind of reading a synopsis on some of the guests that you've had on the show, your background, I mean, not just the entertainment aspect of itself, but I mean, your life up to that point probably must have driven you to do this kind of podcast. Would that be a safe assessment?
Right. Yes. Yeah. I'm what you would call long shot. I kind of grew up with that mantra. Because my old stand-up routine, my dad made a lot of money and then he lost all his money. So I had to sleep in the same room with my grandmother until I was 9 years old. So my bedtime story was, about how she survived the Russian concentration camps. So I grew up with that, and then I was a premature kid. My dad was also a homeless street kid from New York, and then he found success and he lost it. That was impressionable. And then I was born premature. I had ADHD. I guess they say you still have it. I don't like to give myself a kind of horror, a jinx, but a stutter, all the, I was unhealthy and all those things, right? And then on one day I saw the movie Rocky and I was like, here's a guy that's not smart, kind of like me. And he was healthy though. But so I figured I'm going to start to be healthy like Rocky. So I started exercising and working out. And then I became a physical fitness trainer when I was 16. And that was like my first bit of success. Other than making people laugh, that was my first bit of success, and always glommed on to those Rocky-esque stories. And that's, I guess, why my podcast is the way it is, because I've had such an up and down life. Knock on wood, past 20 years have been up, lots of ups and downs. And I think that most people like those kind of stories, at least I do. That's why I do the podcast for that kind of theme.
I think one of my most listened to episodes is an episode about resilience. It was about a guy, his name was Howie Craw. And when he was a kid, he got run over by a bus and he broke both of his legs, and they said he would never walk again. And in time, he believed in himself. He became a marathon runner.
Wow, that is great. And what's his name?
Howie Craw. And he does a podcast too. It's called How We Doing It.
How We Doing It. That's perfect. I'm actually going to write that. That's the kind of guy we need on the show. Howie Craw. That's perfect though.
He would be a guest on your show, no problem. He's a great guy. He was a wonderful guest.
Well, yeah, but that's poetic too. His legs, and then he runs a marathon.
Yeah,
he could have done anything. Like he could have been won the bench pressing competition. But his legs, and then he does the marathon. That's awesome.
How old were you when you started doing stand up?
I was 19 years old. I grew up and was born and raised in Encino, California. And my first place that I did stand-up was in Encino at a place that's long gone called LA Cabaret, which was a very cool place to do stand-up comedy. It was strictly a comedy place. And it's opened up during the comedy boom. Yeah, I was 19. And I did 25 minutes of which is like crazy. But I'd say like 4 minutes was solid for a 19-year-old beginner. And then the rest was like too much fluff. But I did well for a beginner. And then the second time I did stand-up, was a couple months after that. I introduced a band at the Whiskey on Sunset, and I got booed off stage. Which I wear as a badge of honor.
What happened, Michael? What happened?
You know what? My friend calls me up and he goes, "Hey, I want you to introduce the band." Because I was starting to be a nightclub promoter at that point. It was kind of popular, gaining popularity in LA. So I go down there. I was like, "Oh, this is a good opportunity to do some stand-up." I don't have to wait in line to do an open mic. This is going to be great. So then I start to, do like, I'm going to do like kind of like a Kinnison. Yeah, that'll win them over. Rock and roll band, you're right, And they're like, what is going on here? This guy's like slipping into a stand-up routine. We just want to hear a band. Full house. I don't know if you know the Whiskey Go-Go on Sunset. It's a nostalgic place where the Doors performed and all these other great bands. I just like, my friend comes on stage, is like, look, man, I got to give it the hook. You got to introduce the band. People are getting restless and this ain't happening. But, 19 years old, live and learn.
A comedy crowd and a rock crowd, even though people will say, yeah, that you're both going to get a lively response from both of them, but they're not necessarily the same type of people who might be ready for one kind of act or another.
Not on a night where they're just looking to it's like, you got to prepare your comedy crowd, Know
the crowd.
You got to be a special seasoned comedian to go in there and win them over. But you know what? That was the whole mentality. I figured nothing ventured, nothing gained. And I really look back on it. I was like, that was pretty cool. How many people say they got I didn't get booed, but I'd say escorted off stage at the Whiskey trying to do stand-up. Now, I got booed off stage in New Orleans once in Bourbon Street. Yeah, I wrote, directed, and produced a documentary called Generation of Sound. And I filmed across the country for 4 months. It was on the history of house music and raves. And it was in 1993. And we planned 12 events showing my old documentaries, because I was a documentary filmmaker, that I did on nightclubs, because I segued from nightclub promoter to filmmaker. And I'm sitting there and I plan all these events, and there's one room where you have to talk and another room where you do the big event, the dancing and everything. And the nightclub promoter in New Orleans says, "Oh, it's going to be great." I'm like, "Okay, great. Where's the video room where I talk to everybody?" He goes, "No, this is it. There's 1,000 people here. We're going to stop the dancing at midnight and you're going to show the videos and do it here." I said, "Are you nuts? That sounds like I'm going to get lynched. Are you sure?" He goes, No. I'm very excited about it. It's going to be great." It's like, "Okay, great. Let's do it."
So what could possibly go wrong, right?
Yeah, what could go wrong? That sounds like a great idea. Let's try it, right? I already got paid. We're doing a tour. I got to film, people for the event in New Orleans. And I've never seen anything like it. I mean, they turn off the music. They start playing the video on a big screen behind me with 1,000 people. And it's not like the whiskey. I got booed off stage. Like, yeah, bring back the music, play and then I just went on to Bourbon Street, which is like walking distance. And I went to O'Brien's and I said, give me every blended drink and every single one of those drinks right there.
I guess even with doing any sort of comedy or something, you're bound to have those bad days, and I've interviewed a couple of comics too, and they say the same thing. They always have like a worst gig story.
Right. Those are the classic ones right there. Those are my two classic ones. But the second one, I wasn't even doing stand up. I was just trying to present something but I knew that was gonna the recipe for disaster. Other than the whiskey, I don't have like a major bomb because I really you get cooking after a while. But you always have a bomb here and there. It just happens.
You also were an actor as well.
Yeah, my first acting role was playing Dirk Diggler in the Dirk Diggler story, the short film, to Boogie Nights, which Boogie Nights eventually became a feature-length film, which I appear in as well. And that was my first role. And I went on to write, direct, and produce other films that I acted in as well, like a movie called Love Hollywood Style with Faye Dunaway and Andy Dick and Coolio. And I wrote, directed, and produced and acted in that one. And a short film, more a dramatic live-action short film called Rituals and Resolutions, which got me close to a movie deal, but it didn't turn out to a movie deal after like a year of development hell. And I got tired of Hollywood, and I was like, that's why I made this crazy movie, Love Hollywood Style, with Faye Dunaway and Andy Dick and Coolio. But I didn't have any money before I was going to make that movie. I was like, screw Hollywood. I'm going to make my own movie, but I didn't have any money. So I started the business I'm in now, and the business took off. And I was able to pay for that film, which I almost lost the business too by trying to make that film as well. I was like an addicted filmmaker. That's all I wanted to do. But that was my Hollywood, I acted in a couple other things, but those are my big highlights. We're producing a documentary right now about that film, but I try to not get caught up with spending too much of my own money on movies anymore.
You said you played Dirk Diggler in the original movie that Boogie Nights was based on. So this was essentially the same character, but then Mark Wahlberg played it in Boogie Nights. Is that right?
Right. Yeah. In 1988, I was best friends at the time with Paul Thomas Anderson. And like I said, I was a big nightclub promoter back then. And when I first met him, I gave him a drive home and I was just cracking him up all night. And I get a call a couple days later. It's like, look, I want to do this a short, and I want you to be in it. And it's about the rise and fall of a porno star named Dirk Diggler. And I was like, okay, I wanted to be an actor, let's, so, we talked about it for like months and months and months. We did some other funny videos, talking about it. And then we finally shot it. And it was back in those days, you shot everything on video and edited it on video, video to video, 2 separate VCRs. And it did quite well. He entered it into the American Film Institute and it won awards there. But that was more of like a Spinal Tap documentary. And you could see it online. I don't post it on my YouTube, but you could see the Dirk Diggler story online if you search it. And we talked about it for years, and it turned into like a feature-length documentary, Spinal Tap-esque Dirk Diggler story. And then eventually he just said, look, I'm going to do a full-blown movie and call it Boogie Nights instead of the Dirk Diggler story. And then I played called me back to play a cameo, a stereo shop customer that Don Cheadle tries to sell me a stereo. So I'm the reluctant buyer of that, and, that scene there. And then that's my Boogie Nights Dirk Diggler story.
Well, that's really interesting. You don't really hear of like major movies that had like a minor short film that led to its development.
That was like the modus operandi in the 90s, that was, and it still probably is, I mean, I know that it was really happening that way. And that's what led me to do my short film. I did because Paul, did a short film, and it got him the ability to do his first film, which was Hard Eight with Gwyneth Paltrow and Samuel Jackson and John C. Reilly. And through that, why that happened, it gave him, an opportunity to show his screenplay Boogie Nights to New Line Cinema. And I figured, well, this is a vehicle, I'm going to go segue from doing these video documentaries on nightclubs, and I got to get into doing a short film, on celluloid, real quality. Back then, it had to be celluloid. It couldn't be, high def now. It's just cheaper. But I did a live action dramatic short film, and it got me close to getting a movie deal for one of my screenplays. But it was like the late 90s at this point, 1999. Things are stiffening up. The renaissance of, and plus it's just it's a crapshoot. It's just a tough business. But I got close for one of my screenplays about underground gambling casinos. It was called Underground Games, about underground gambling casinos in Los Angeles, which is semi-autobiographical because I did that when I was a nightclub promoter with a guy named Larry Pollock who owns the Saddle Ranch restaurants, the restaurants with a mechanical bull. I don't know if you're familiar. Are you from LA, by the way?
No, I'm on the other coast.
My stepdad was from the Bronx. My dad was from Brooklyn, and my mom's from Manhattan. So it's one of the boroughs I don't have family from, but we're close. So anyways, long story short, got close to a movie deal, but it just didn't happen. That's why I said, I'm going to start my own business to make my own movie. That's what I did. And that's why I did Love Hollywood Style.
I know you said earlier that Rocky was the inspiration of how to come back. Who was an inspiration to you for wanting to entertain? Was there anyone specifically or?
Jackie Gleason.
Really?
Well, really my mother, my mother was a cross between Marilyn Monroe and Don Rickles. And I stuttered over my words because I was a premature kid. I wasn't a healthy kid. I had a lot of health issues, and she was just fast and sharp. And she had a great sense of humor like Don Rickles. So I would, kind of, and I came from a large family and I was the youngest. So you try to keep up with them, I come from like a New York family, a bunch of hustlers, so like you get stuff stolen off your plate, trying to eat or, it's just it was a really weird family, tough in a good way. Everybody's family's weird. The impetus to entertain was just to get a word in edgewise. I think that's what it is, to be heard.
I guess when there's that many siblings too, it's always that how many siblings did you have?
I got 2 older brothers and an older sister. And like I said, my grandmother was in the house with us, my stepdad. And and my dad, he stayed with us kind of for a while, parked in his van. My dad, when he lost all his money, he used to be a multimillionaire. His story is interesting because he had a partnership in the late 60s with a guy named Alan Smith. And it was a tool business that wasn't doing well. And then he decided, since the tool business is not doing well, I'm going to sell these calculators on a mail order campaign to Canada for Brother International. He sold all these calculators and became what is known as, in those circles, as the calculator kid. Made millions of dollars. And then he lost all his money with a reckless lifestyle. And when he tried to do the tool business again with his old partner said, no, I can't. I don't need any partners. This is the mid 70s now. He says, I already got a business. It's called Harbor Freight. So I don't know if you ever heard of Harbor Freight.
I have.
That was my dad's old business partner who I met, Alan Smith, great guy. It was a big lesson for me. Like, look, steady is, steady pace, learn, put a good head on your shoulders, don't be so extreme, just because you make millions doesn't mean it's going to last and bad things can happen. Alan Smith, on the other hand, was the turtle that was steady. So my dad was the jackrabbit that was nutty. So that's, I forgot the main question. See, I got the ADHD. I just ramble on. What was the original question?
Now I forgot.
Yeah, remember you got the ADHD as well.
About being in a big family and having a voice. That's right.
Well, well, I mentioned my dad because eventually he went to jail. And then when he got out of jail, he was penniless. And he had his van and he lived in his van outside of the house in Encino. So my mom was broke making, because my stepdad didn't have much money either. He was like a kind of fledgling, carpet salesman. So we were like the Encino Jubilees. We were like a poor family, bunch of Jews live in a rich neighborhood. All these old Cadillacs looked like we used to have money, but we were like, my dad's van is parked out there. My stepdad has an El Camino delivering carpet. My mom's struggling to support us. Everybody worked, and my grandmother, had to babysit us, and it was just a really wild family. My dad was notorious when he had all his money to do these crazy Hollywood parties, which his character is loosely based on the Jack Horner character in Boogie Nights. A lot of the manners, because Paul loved my dad, and there's a lot of impetus, to the Jack Horner character in Boogie Nights about my dad, who just was notorious for doing sheer carnality orgy parties at his house. And it was just a kind of like a pseudo-famous, crazy, infamous lifestyle. So that was my family. Yeah, it was pretty crazy. And there was a large family and there was a lot of people around. And it was no nutty.
Let's talk a little bit about your podcast, The Long Shot leaders.
Yeah, let's segue out of that dysfunctionality. So I don't have a filter, Jim. I don't know what to tell you. But you're Italian, right? See, you're okay. We both come the same background. We're from New York. I'm from Encino, but my family's from New York. We talk with our hands. Is your family boisterous and wild?
Oh, always.
Oh,
No one knows
beautiful.
how to have a quiet conversation.
Love it. Beautiful. All right. So you're no stranger to this. The podcast is called Long Shot Leaders. It's about basically telling long shot stories. Not every story is like a Rocky story, but it can range anywhere from Ben Lesser, who we had on, who's a Holocaust survivor, which was a very serious long shot story. And he did most of the talking because, let's face it, he's told the story a lot, to where we can have, my comedy mentor and coach, Greg Dean, who's the world foremost stand-up comedy coach on the planet, that was a much different podcast, who had cancer, and came back from it. It's really interesting when a comedian gets cancer, because cancer's not off limits to joke around about.
Sure.
Because comedy, there's always an audience. If there's an audience for it, usually it's tougher nowadays because everybody's so particular. But usually you could joke about anything as long as there's enough rapport with the audience. So we do that. And, on deck, we have Steve Miocic, who just lost his UFC title, but we have that. He's a fireman. He's got a great long shot story. Hell, we just had a long shot story today that was Jody Goober, who's the daughter of Peter Goober, who I don't know if you know who Peter Goober is. He owns the half of the Golden State Warriors. He directed Rain Man and Batman and Gorillas in the Mist and tons of other great movies. He's the most powerful man in Hollywood. And she grew up in that environment, but she was a little heavy set, attractive girl, but she was a little heavy set. And she had insecurities about her image. So she ended up creating a business called Beyond Yoga, which makes a clothing line for all sizes of women. So that was like, a long shot story because, a lot of people, don't actually create a business out of their insecurity and make lemonade out of that.
What do you think it is that makes people persevere, that makes them not throw in the towel? I mean, these stories that you have on your show are, they're pretty powerful ideas of, things that happen to people, Holocaust survivor and surviving cancer and, and so on and so forth. Did you see like a common thread with a lot of these guests?
Jim, that's a great question. And you'd be surprised, but somebody hasn't asked me that yet. And I love that question. So here's the thing, is that once a person hits a crossroads, they either can go down a negative path or a positive path. And what does that mean? That means they could either associate massive pain towards not taking action and massive pleasure towards taking action, or they can crawl up and just say, look, I'm just not going to take action. I associate too much pain with that. So there's a crossroads where somebody says, I'm going to take action because I'm at threshold and I can't stand it anymore. That's one component. The other component is once they decide to venture out into the water, it's just if they get a little pattern built up to where they can have some success. It's like Richard Pryor talks about when I started, he said, I started boxing and then I kind of threw out a jab. It's a ping. And it's like, hey, man, this might really work. Get a little confidence. That's all that people need sometimes is to really make that decisive decision and then accompany that with just the incipient stages of a pattern in a positive direction.
When people go through all that in life, like you can even relate to this yourself, I'm sure. When you look back at everything that you've been through, would there be anything that you changed, or would you just say, you know what? The hard times made me who I am right now, so
I would change everything. I don't know why people say that because it's realistic. First of all, if you can go back and change things, yeah, I would change it because that question's always prefaced as, would you go back and change anything? And you're like, yeah, because you're asking me if I can know what I know now. But would you go back and change anything and not know what you know now? Of course I wouldn't change anything because the unknown, I might have ended up somewhere else. So I always hear that question. I'm like, yeah, I would go back and change so many things. I have failed so many times and made so many stupid mistakes. I'll share some of those with you real quick.
Okay.
This is after I made money. Well, I'll go backwards because I've got that ADHD. So I bought an Escalade when I started making money and I told my secretary at my business, when I first started my business, I said, you find me a good policy and get it hooked up because I got to leverage everything, right? The time elapsed over 6 weeks. I didn't renew it. Over 2 days after the 2-day time period, the car got stolen. I wasn't covered. That's a major failure. It's an Escalade. I mean, I've made so many, so many injuries and so many silly mistakes. You ever see the movie Defending Her Life with Albert Brooks? And if you haven't seen it, I suggest seeing it.
I know what you're talking about.
I've seen that
movie. I know
movie.
what you're talking about.
For your listeners, it's basically he has to get judged on his life, and he's made so many mistakes, and he doesn't realize and exhibit bravery. And that's the one thing I've exhibited is it's like defending your life, looking it back and being cognizant of all those mistakes. So there's one last line I'll share with you that I share with a lot of people. Okay, I say, in the movie The Natural, Glenn Close tells Robert Redford, I believe we have 2 lives, one that we learn with and one that we live with. And hopefully you hit a mark earlier rather than later, that you totally come to the threshold and you've learned all these mistakes. And you're like, holy crap, I finally hit this point where synergy has set in. And now I can take advantage of all the mistakes that have occurred. And then you're able to really maximize on the life you can live with, which is the second half of your life, and take advantage of those things.
I like that. What's the best piece of advice that anybody ever gave you?
Oh my God, that's another great question. Since I just interviewed Jody Gruber today, I'll do a Peter Gruber one. There's so many, I can't think of the best one. It's just the one I'm thinking about right now. He's a very successful man. And this was when I was a nightclub promoter. I knew I didn't want to be a nightclub promoter, or even the segueing into owning a restaurant or anything. I didn't want to be a restaurateur. Even if I was going to be the best one on the planet, I didn't want to be one. I wanted to be a comedian. I wanted to be an actor. I was afraid to tell him that, though. But the best advice that he gave me is when I had lunch with me because he liked me. I just did this. I did a big promotion for the movie Batman. I had 4,000 people. It was like probably the largest promotion ever for a movie ever, at a nightclub. I said, look, I want to do this and that. And he goes, hey, he had a pencil on the table. We're at a restaurant. He goes, move the pencil. I moved the pencil. He goes, did you try to do that? Because I said, he goes, are you doing this? Yeah, I'm trying to do that. He goes, I just did that. And it sounds like a silly little metaphor, but I'm talking to a guy that has that 40-yard stare who he sees the matrix, right? He looks at all that computer code and he's like, just move the pencil. And after a while, it seemed so trite. I was like actually pissed off when he told me that. I was like, you're just toying with me. I'm like at 20, I'm like 21, 22. You're just toying around with me. You're king of the hill sitting on that. But he wasn't. The best piece of advice I can give people is just don't make big things out of what you feel is impossible. Just tell yourself, I'm going to do this, even though it doesn't seem real. And then focus on doing it. And then tell yourself you are going to do it and put it. And the last thing I'll say is make your body have the physiology that you're going to do it. Now you have a triad of what changes everything in your life: your physiology, your focus, and your words that you tell yourself. So that was the best advice that I could think of at this time. But I'm sure there's more, but that was one of them.
Do you have a special piece of advice that you like to give to people? I mean, given what you've gone through with your life?
That's another great question, Jim. What I like to tell people is there's several of them. I tell my daughter, I've been saying this for years. Don't get embarrassed by what you feel is embarrassing, because that sometimes is more embarrassing. Don't be embarrassed. It's a waste of time. Just take action. Sometimes it's good to vet things out on what you want to do, but force your head to look in the direction that you want to go and take decisive action and believe that you can do it, and focus on it constantly and constantly adjust, because it's not going to get your way. Take massive action on doing the things you want to do, and be prepared to fail, but just keep on going. Don't stop. Just keep going.
Push the pencil.
That's right. It's like I said, it was so trite, but just move the pencil. And you know what? And that's what a lot of these guys do. Like Warren Buffett or Bezos or all those guys. They're just like, sometimes they're trying to move a pencil and it fails. And that's what stand-up comedy is too. It's like, just get up there and do it. Do your set. Keep on writing. Well, that joke worked. And then you built up an arsenal. You built up an immunity. Like you don't know how to tie a shoe. It's unconscious incompetence. Somebody tells you how to tie a shoe. because you tried at least. Now you have conscious incompetence. You know, somebody showed you, but you don't know how to do it yet. Then you learn how to tie a shoe. Now it's conscious competence. Now, Jim, we tie our shoes. We don't think about it. It's unconscious competence. And that's just the piece of advice I give anybody is say, look, that's how you go about doing everything. The podcast, let's go back to that. Maybe it's a nice place to close. Is that I didn't know anything about podcasting. You just start to get all the information you can. You set your goal date of when you're going to launch, and you have no choice. That's your launch date. You can't push that back. You have to do the launch date. Although with podcasting, you can't have a definite date because, when you submit it to iTunes, they don't launch it right away. But you have to, you launch it on that date and you tell everybody it's, I've launched it and stay tuned on when you can get it.
It'll be there.
Right. You understand.
Yeah. What you're saying also is it's easier to say what if and try rather than live with the regret of I should have.
That's beautiful. Yeah, you're right. Because regret is, I don't want to swear, regret is terrible. It'll eat you alive. So don't, just do it. Because you're going to regret. You're going to regret it. You only have one life. And trust me, you'll tell yourself, I don't regret this, I don't regret that. Sure you do. I regret a lot of things. Now I just always remind myself that. So I don't neglect things. So I don't regret more in the future.
Now, we talked about looking back on your life and changing things. What about your future? Is there anything that you still would love to try?
Yeah. Future's all set. I've vetted it out. I got my 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10, 15, 20, 30. I have a business called Abidac. We brand our own tarps. We're going to be coming out with a product that will define the industry. So that's that's going to be a big monetary home run. Things are going well right now, but that will be big. And that's going to be in a little over a year and a half from now. At the same time, we're doing the podcast, which is growing, which will work hand in hand for a documentary that we're producing right now called Burn the Boats. And that's basically about people that throw away their entire life savings for their passion as opposed to chasing opportunity. And it analyzes a lot of people, of course. And the basis of that is the film that we did in the in 93, because basically that was the epitome of my apex of burning the boats, because I've burned the boats so many times, and I have a lot of filmmakers that we're interviewing now, and they've all just for their passion, and Hollywood's notorious for this, just burning the boats. So that documentary will be done by the end of the year, and we'll be submitting that to film festivals, and hopefully that'll get picked up by Netflix and do really, really well. But that's basically to continue film projects, and launch, and still be an entrepreneur. So to pretty much doing everything I'm doing now, just expanding it. You're going to start once COVID. Yeah. And once COVID lifts, I want to. Now my kids are getting older because I've taken time off of my life to spend time with my kids. That's what happens when they turn to be teenagers. If you find out you have more time in your hands, I'm going to start doing stand-up again.
Before I let you go, this is a podcast about podcasts, of course. So what are some of the podcasts that you like to listen to, Michael?
I hate to not be original, but one of my favorite podcasts, it's just because it's just good, is the podcast with Mark Maron. He's just a good guy. He's just good at what he does. I don't know him personally, but he's smart. The guests that he has, he has a stream of consciousness. So I really like that. As far as a how-to, I really like John Lee Dumas and Entrepreneurs on Fire. It's just straight up, compact, tight. We're going to teach you a lesson, and here you go. So there's that. And you got to go with the big daddy. You got to go with Joe Rogan. His podcasts are long. He's got a little too much advertisement in the beginning. A lot of advertisement. But as far as once you get down to the podcast, because of his pedigree of stand-up comedy, his commentary with the UFC, with his acting background, and all the culmination of everything he's done, guy's just a great interviewer. I don't think you can consider Howard Stern a podcast, but that's another Mac Daddy. Just state of the, that's Michael Jordan hitting 3-pointers, nothing but net. Those guys really hit the honesty and in the moment and sincerity. So I would go with those picks.
obviously, because you have so much going on, I know this will be a breeze for you because we have a portion of the show called Shameless Self-Promotion.
Shameless self-promotion.
And this is where you can let everybody know how they can follow you or get in touch with you, or if they want to know more, get to know more about you or more about your podcast. The opportunity is right here, Michael. So
Awesome.
Take it away.
Thank you. Just tell you straight up right now, just go to Long Shot Leader, just go to iTunes, Spotify, anywhere, Long Shot Leaders with Michael Stein. And if you want to hear underdog stories of people that have found success, that have come from behind. And, I could just tell you one thing. Our stories are all about just trying to tell a story in the structure of, let's say, a Save the Cat, John Truby, screenwriting structure, but telling something that's extremely honest and finding out what made these people find success and to tell a story with an arc about their life. And that's what we do. So longshotleaders.com, go to there if you want to get in touch with me. If you have a great long shot story, go to longshotleaders.com, go to the contact us page, and there's a pull down to say, I have a long shot story. If you have a great long shot story, we want to tell that story. Doesn't matter if you're a famous person or a non-famous person. We're looking for great stories where people have overcome massive obstacles, find success of any way, shape, or form. So reach out to us.
Yeah, and the podcasts are definitely the best place to get to hear about these.
Absolutely.
His name, Michael Stein. He is the host of Long Shot Leaders with Michael Stein. Check out his podcast. Michael, thank you so much for coming by the show.
Jim, absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Be a rebel. Follow the show at Sherpalution on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
Hey, Rebels, being a podcast Sherpa, it's the easiest job in the world. I know, you're shocked. I know. I'll give you a second to get over it. Okay, you feel better now? Okay, good. Now that you've recovered, I want to tell you that the tricky thing about it is you have to listen to a lot of different podcasts. You got to see what works, what doesn't work. You want to recommend things to people that they're going to enjoy. So, I listen to podcasts regularly, and I have a playlist of a whole bunch of podcasts. And every once in a while, you got to switch up that playlist and check out new things. So every once in a while, I think I want to drop a little review about some shows that I've been listening to that maybe you'd like to check out as well. Since I've had a lot of wonderful guests on the show, I will mention the shows of some of my guests as well. And the one that I'm mentioning this week is no exception. It is Just Nah Science, or Just Nah Science, depending how you say it. And the hosts, Lauren and Nick, have been guests on the show not once, but twice. And they were very helpful during the beginning of the COVID pandemic. And they were providing a lot of good information. The show basically debunks things that people are writing about science on social media, like Twitter and Instagram or whatever silly things are out there. They have an excellent way of presenting it. Nick is a research scientist, and Lauren is a science teacher. So there's a lot of knowledge between the two of them, and just wonderful people, by the way, too. And the show is a lot of fun. The language gets a little bit salty sometimes, so maybe not one to listen to when the little kids are in the car. But when you got your headphones on or you're alone and driving, it's definitely interesting, and you're going to learn stuff, and you will be informed. They're not on anybody's payroll. They're just telling the truth. I think you're really going to enjoy it. So check it out. Just Nah Science. They're out on your favorite podcast apps.
And now it's time for Sherpa Suggestions.
So what can I say? Everybody likes to come back. So for this week's Sherpa Suggestions, here's a few suggestions about podcasts that deal with comebacks. We have The Comeback Coach, The Slow Road to Better, The Epic Comeback Podcast, Comeback Stories, The Comeback Show, Experience Rich, and finally, Back from Broken. These are all inspiring podcasts that you might want to check out, in addition to checking out Michael Stein's podcast. So as far as my comeback, well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to go in the kitchen, and when I come back, I'll do the outro. That works for me. Thank you so much to Michael Stein of the Long Shot Leaders podcast. And I urge you to check it out. It will definitely be a podcast that will lift your spirits. So if you need a little spirit lifting, that's the show to check out. If you want to do a little weightlifting, well, I don't know. Do an exercise podcast. I don't know. If you try and lift anything, you might end up with a hernia like I did. So just be careful. What else? I don't know. I'm just babbling. Be sure to listen to this show on verbal.com. And if you subscribe, that'll be really nice. VURBL.com. That's if you want to listen on a computer, or you can hear the show on any of your favorite podcast apps, or you can even follow the show on my website, Sherpalution.com. And speaking of following, you know where we are: social media, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. At Sherpalution, that's all you need to know. Okay, Mr. Bruce, I think we have enough inspiration for one day. What do you say we get on out of here and let's go inspire the masses? Oh, wait a minute. There's a Colombo marathon on? Well, okay, we'll go inspire after Colombo. I just have one question for you. Just one last question. What does Viva la Sherpalution mean? Why do I sound like Dirty Louie when I say that? I don't know. Anyway, bye, folks. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to Too Many Podcasts. Please disperse. You can go home now. I said you can go home now. Viva la Sherpalution. Viva la Sherpalution. Oh. Yeah, I'll come back now, you hear?